Suzanne Collins made me sympathize with an evil, evil man, while at the same time showing that his actions were not okay. And I think that that is pretty remarkable. Having only read the first Hunger Games book, I didn't have many expectations leading into reading The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Now, I knew that the book followed the antagonist of the main series, Coriolanus Snow, or Coriolanus? I'm just going to call him Corio from now on, because that's just easier. And I knew that we'll be following him as a young man, and as such, it was probably going to be a villain origin story. What I did not expect to get was a carefully crafted tale that showed how ambition, self-obsessed values, and paranoia can transform a person. While at the same time, I honestly fell for this character and his charms and what appeared at first to be empathy. As this review will be spoiler-free, I won't get into the details, but apart from some pacing issues, this is definitely a winner in my books that took a really deep dive into human nature. Starting with the plot, I'm pretty sure that I can tell you this much. It follows Corio Snow, a student living in the privileged capital, 10 years after a war that resulted in the capital winning, and 2 students from each of the 12 districts are being sent to the pretty primitive Hunger Games, which is their punishment for losing. Now, living in poverty while keeping up the appearance of his noble lineage, Corio mentors tribute Lucy Gray, and both his and her futures are entwined. The plot was largely good, and kept me invested. But that's only because most chapters cheekily ended on a cliffhanger. Now, there were some very bizarre pacing problems, where the book was incredibly slow-paced, and this is coming from someone who has The Name of the Wind as one of their favourite books, but a chapter would end with something incredibly exciting, only to go back to a crawl just afterwards. Now, this was a double-edged sword, as obviously I wanted to keep on reading to find out what the inevitable twist at the end of each chapter was, but it became really repetitive and sometimes felt super forced. And it didn't help pacing-wise that part 3 of the book was even slower than the other 2. With this combined with a setting change, I wouldn't blame some readers if they just put the book down there. Also, this is also quite a good time to point out that Collins' prose is not complex really at all. However, it is very digestible, and was great at quickly shocking the reader with quick one-liners that had huge implications. Honestly, the plot was filled with exciting moments, but it did drag out quite a bit. I mean, this is, 500 pages, 517 pages, so it's the biggest Hunger Games book, I think. And the pacing issues is probably the book's biggest flaw. Alright, now let's get on to something a little better, which is the characters. The characters were mostly positive. Some of the side characters felt way too one-dimensional for me, which was a shame. However, I found myself really enjoying the leads. Tigress, Corio's cousin, was a delightful, optimistic character with some darkness hidden beneath, and that added much appreciated depth to her. Dr. Gore was a twisted, character that I hated as a person, but I loved to read. Her mentality on life pushed forward the book's message of the perilousness of human nature, along with tributes to Lucy Gray, who was very much Dr. Gore's opposite and paralleled her in influencing Corio. Speaking of Lucy, she was a fantastic character to follow. From her bombastic entrance, she was the main reason I kept on reading. The other lead, before we get to Corio, is Sejanus, and he was fine. He was really just the moral high ground for most of the book, and his existence did feel like he was just there to basically be a cover for Corio's descent. I touched on this earlier, but Koryo terrified me. Or more specifically, the fact that I actually sympathized with him until some key scenes a little over the halfway point really had me in awe as a reader, because I could tell he was a bad person from the get-go. At no point was I rooting for this character, but he was entertaining to read, and his slow descent became more apparent the more his manipulative, devious, selfish, and possessive side took over. I should also mention that there is, a romance between the two main characters, but I wouldn't call it really romantic, because Koryo's controlling way that he views Lucy, the possessiveness that he views her, was honestly disgusting, and it was at this point that I said, no, I don't like you anymore. I can't handle you as a person. I'm rooting for Lucy to get away. So, but that was intentional, so it's a strength of the book, but if you don't like it, if it's too much, then I totally understand that. Anyway, overall, the characters were decent, with a few great standouts. I won't mention the world building too much, but I will say that the way that the capital is presented in this book, along with the discoveries regarding the Hunger Games' origin, felt incredibly natural and added a lot to the world without feeling too forced, like what happens with a lot of prequels and even sequels. Overall, I did really enjoy The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. My favourite part of the book was its exploration of human nature, and I can't actually touch upon what that is in too much detail without getting into spoiler territory, but also the theming as well with it, and some of the clever nods it has to the title of the book and some other bits inside it were really well done, and I think it's actually worth a try just because of the really amazing way that theming was implemented into this book. I also think that it's worth a try if you're a Hunger Games fan. I recommend picking it up. Apart from the pacing, there is a lot to love in this book. Mind you, Koryo does make you sick sometimes. But in a strange sort of way, it's really satisfying to finally see his descent, as it didn't happen all at once, but was slowly shown throughout the book as he just made terrible decision after terrible decision. It's not a very fun book to read, so I don't think I'll be reading it anytime soon, but it was an enjoyable read that really forced you to think. So that's what I'll leave you on. I will give it a solid 8 out of 10. I might give it a 7 or a 9 depending on the day, that how I'm thinking of it, but I'll just stick to 8 at the moment. 4 out of 5 stars, 8 out of 10. It was a pretty good read, and I do recommend it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for other videos. I've got a Mistborn review coming up, because Brandon Sanderson is a great author, and I'm really excited for his new Stormlight book. And yeah, let me know what type of videos you want to see in the comments. I've got a new Star Wars one coming out soon on the Clone Wars, and the first episode of the Bad Batch came out just the other day. Just look at my channel and you can find that out. But anyway, I will see you guys later.